talk about what is next for Petr Yan. So, Petr Yan just lost to Merab a few hours ago, and a lot of people were picking Petr Yan to win this fight. Petr Yan was a heavy favorite in the money line, but he lost, and not only he lost, he got dominated in the fight. And now, what is next for Petr Yan? So, if we look at some of the fight statistics, so Petr Yan significant strike 70 compared to 135 for Merab, and we thought he had a striking advantage, but here looking at these stats, it looks like Merab is the better striker. Takedown landed just 1 for Petr Yan and 11 for Merab, so this was not surprising. We know Merab has a pretty strong wrestling game, and I was expecting Petr to stuff a lot of takedowns, but Merab is really good at shooting a takedown. Takedown defended was 38 for Petr Yan, so he defended a lot of takedown, and Merab just defended 4 of Peter's takedowns. But the thing is, Merab has so many takedowns to offer that even if you defend a lot of them, you will still be taken down. He defended 38, but he still got taken down 11 times, and in a 5-round fight, being taken down 11 times is a lot. I think this is a record for Merab shooting these many takedowns. Control time is just 1 minute and 50 seconds for Petr Yan compared to 6 minutes and 53 seconds for Merab. So very dominant stats for Merab. Nobody was expecting him to control Peter like this, dominate him like this, but he did. Props to Merab. Now let's look at the judges scorecard for this fight. So Mike Bell gave it 45-50 for Merab, the blue corner. Sal D'Amato scored it again 45-50 for Merab. So these two guys have not given a single round to Petr Yan, and this is really bad for Peter because we were expecting him to win this fight, but instead he got dominated, and he got dominated very badly. None of these judges, and if we go to the third judges also, that is also 45-50. Jumichiro Kamijo again for Merab. So all the judges score it 50-45 for the winner by unanimous decision, Merab the Machine Dvalishvili. So Merab, his stock really went up a lot. I see him being a favorite in his next couple of fights because of this fight, this win alone against Petr Yan. So if all the judges are giving it to you 50-45, Merab Dvalishvili won by unanimous decision. So this really says a lot. If we talk about the odds for this fight, the opening odds, Peter was a favorite at -175, but near the closing, the time this fight got started, he became a -286 favorite. So this is a huge favorite, and instead Merab, if you look at Merab, he started as +150 underdog and closed at +200 underdog. So these are the odds of this fight, and they show that Merab was a huge underdog and Peter was a huge favorite, but instead we got something like 50-45 and 50-45 across all the three judges. Pretty dominant win for Merab and pretty sad loss for Petr Yan. If we look at the recent fights of Petr Yan, we see it all started here with the DQ illegal knee in UFC 259 back in 2021 March. So 2 years ago exactly, the downfall of Petr Yan started when he DQ'd Aljamain Sterling. Prior to this fight, he had a record of 15 wins and just 1 loss. So pretty strong and dominant fighter he was back then. I think he was also in the pound for pound list. Now Petr Yan is not in the pound for pound list. You won't find him in the top 15 guys. After that, people said, okay, he was winning this fight. Then he was given Corey Sandhagen. It was a close fight, but he beat Corey by unanimous decision. This was in October 2021. A lot of people after this fight were saying that Peter will, dominate Aljamain. Peter will kill Aljamain Sterling, but instead Aljamain beat him via split decision. I picked Aljo to win this fight, and he really showed his wrestling and grappling. Took down Petr Yan, held him there. He could not finish Peter, but he got the decision, split decision, and he retained his belt. This was in April of 2022. Then happened the robbery with Sean O'Malley. So he won a split decision against Petr Yan back in October of last year. I think this is a robbery. I think Petr Yan won this fight, but it is what it is, man. Petr has had some unfortunate situations in the past with this loss and also this DQ illegal knee. So these two should have been W's in his resume, but instead they are listed as losses. So I don't know what the judges saw in the Sean O'Malley fight. They gave it to Sean O'Malley. This was a robbery. But let's talk about the recent fight which happened today, and he lost a comfortable, unanimous decision to Merab. Nobody is arguing this is a robbery. None of that sort is happening now. And this was the main event, 5-round fight. Peter's stock really plummeted. I think after tonight, a lot of people will pick Merab in his upcoming fight against whoever. Maybe they put Merab against Sean O'Malley, so Merab will be a favorite. They might put Merab against Corey Sandhagen, so again Merab will be a favorite in that fight as well. Merab has openly said that he'll not fight Aljamain Sterling. So if you look at the division right now, this is before the rankings come out on Tuesday Indian Standard Time. So right now Sean O'Malley is number 1. Petr Yan, who is number 2, now he'll be downgraded. Merab, who was number 3, now I think he'll move up to number 2 or number 1. Marlon Vera is number 4. Corey Sandhagen number 5. Raw Font number 6. Dominic Cruz number 7. Yadong Song number 8. Pedro Munoz number 9. Ricky Simon number 10. Then we have Umar, rising talent, at number 11. We have Adrian Yanez number 12. Chris Gutierrez number 13 and Jack Shore 14. So these are the guys, and obviously we have the champion, which is Aljamain Sterling at the top right over here. So Aljamain and Merab are good friends, so these two guys are not fighting each other. Now I think they'll pair up Peter with some upcomer and somebody who's ranked lower. I think he already beat Corey Sandhagen, so this fight is not needed. Marlon Vera can probably be matched up against Petr Yan, but I think they'll take somebody who's really young and exciting, a rising prospect. It could be Umar. They might make this fight next. Petr Yan versus Umar Nurmagomedov. And let me tell you, if Merab did this to Peter, if he outlanded Peter and wrestled him for 5 rounds, if Umar Nurmagomedov takes you down, he'll not only hurt you, but he might be able to finish you. So Merab is not a submission guy, he's a wrestler predominantly, but Umar can strike, Umar can wrestle, and he can also put a rear naked choke on to finish the fight. So I think Petr Yan has a lot of problems if he is matched up against a wrestler, grappler, people like Umar and all. I think the UFC will try to use him as a stepping stone, because I don't think after losing to O'Malley, even though this was a robbery, after losing to Aljamain twice and now getting dominated by Merab, I don't think Petr Yan has that. Before this fight happened with Merab, he had a lot of fans, he had a lot of hardcore fans who were backing him up and saying that Peter should be actually the champion of this division. But I don't think after today's performances they will say that. So his stock really went down. I don't see him selling tickets now. They'll give him to some rising star who they expect will make Petr Yan look like he should probably retire, and that guy is Umar. So if we talk about the division, we have the champion Aljamain Sterling, who is really prepping to face Triple C in his upcoming title defense. So Triple C is making a comeback. Let's see what happens in the fight. And if Aljo beats Triple C, then we are in a situation where the guy who should fight for the belt will not fight, because these two guys are friends. I made a video on this recently, how Merab winning against Petr Yan is actually bad for the UFC. So if Aljamain wins against Henry Cejudo, then these two guys will not fight each other. So the UFC will kind of get frustrated and angry, because you can't get behind a guy who's saying that I'll not fight for the belt because my friend has the belt. We have seen instances where two friends have fought each other in the past like Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. So they were friends before fighting for the belt, and after the fight also they are still, I'll say, friends to this day. So you can be friends and still fight for the belt. I don't know why Merab does not get this, but anyway, so if Aljo beats Triple C, then it's gonna be a really bad thing for the division. Now we have rising guys like Umar and Petr Yan will be a huge fight. Both these guys are pretty strong. Peter has shown weaknesses in the wrestling department, in the grappling department. I think Umar, if he takes you down and you have like 2 minutes left in the clock, then he might be able to finish you by a rear naked choke or a guillotine or something like that. He is pretty crafty on the ground, not like Merab who just takes you down and keeps you there. Umar will look for the finish. So that is a very tough fight for Petr Yan, I think, and UFC will try to pair him up if they think that Petr Yan is not selling tickets and his stock really went down after the loss with Merab. They will try to give him to a up and coming contender who's really hungry, and I see that in Umar Nurmagomedov. As for can Petr Yan retire, should he retire after this fight, I think Peter is only 30 years old, so I was shocked to see that Peter is actually younger than Merab. So Merab is actually 32 years old. So Merab is the older fighter. Peter is only 30 years old. He was a champion when he was in his late 20s. So great guy, lot of talent. He has a lot of room to improve. But really, his next 2-3 years will decide whether he'll become a champion again or he'll not. I say he should focus on his wrestling and grappling more than his striking. We know he's a really good striker in the division. A lot of people were calling him at one point the best striker in the UFC. So I don't think he really needs to go to Tiger Muay Thai and improve his already great striking anymore. Instead, he should focus on his wrestling and grappling, because in the rematch against Aljamain took him down and controlled him, took his back and won the round. And today also we saw that Merab wrestled with him and he was able to get so many takedowns, won a clear cut unanimous decision. So I think Petr Yan should focus really on his wrestling and grappling and not so much on his striking. His striking is already elite. If he wants to face guys like Umar, he will have to round up his game even more, even though Petr Yan has pretty good wrestling defense, but he still needs to improve, as we saw today. So that's it. These are my thoughts on what's next for Petr Yan. I think they'll match him up against a rising contender, and I don't think Peter should announce his retirement. I think he has another 3-4 years, good 3-4 years to give to the UFC. That's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'll see you guys in the next one.